I walked into my room and froze. Something was wrong. The air felt too still, too quiet. The desk in the corner, the one I'd spent years building my dream setup on, was empty. Gone. No tower, no monitor, no mouse, no keyboard, no cables, nothing. Just dust lines where everything used to be. I stood there for a moment, not breathing. Then my heart started to pound. I turned back into the hallway, walked fast, nearly tripping down the stairs. My parents, Magnus and Helena, sat in the living room with mugs of coffee like it was a perfectly normal afternoon. My mom had her feet tucked under a blanket. Dad was flipping through the newspaper like we were in a vintage movie. "Where's my computer?" I asked. My voice sounded weird, like it didn't belong to me. Helena looked up, totally unbothered. "Oh, we sold it." I blinked. "What, we sold your computer?" she repeated, like I hadn't heard her the first time. Magnus didn't even look at me. Astrid needed a few things for her winter formal. She didn't have a dress or shoes. "You weren't using it much anyway." My stomach dropped. "I use that computer every day. For work, for design clients, for gaming tournaments, for everything." "Lower your voice, Lucas," my mom said sharply. "It's just a computer." "No, it's not. They didn't get it. They never had. That rig wasn't some off-the-shelf machine. It was a custom build. Every part had a story. Every dollar had been earned from years of part-time jobs, freelance gigs, birthday money saved instead of spent. You sold it without even asking me." "You live under our roof," Magnus said, finally putting his paper down. "Technically, it was part of our house. We had the right." I stepped back, the heat in my chest rising. "Is that how this works now? You get to take whatever you want from me, whenever it's convenient." Helena crossed her arms. "Astrid's event is important. She can't show up in cheap clothes. It's not like you can't build another one eventually." I laughed once, sharp bitter. "Right. Years of saving and working wiped out so Astrid can wear designer heels to a dance." Neither of them said anything. I looked at them, really looked, and realized something that twisted my gut. They didn't feel bad. Not even a little. That's when the betrayal started to settle in. Quiet, heavy. Because it wasn't just the PC they'd stolen. It was the years I'd spent trying to be good enough not to be invisible. Have you ever worked for something for years, only to watch someone take it like it meant nothing? If you were me in that moment, what would you have done? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever been the invisible one in your own family, vote number 1. If you think family should always come first, vote number 7. Don't forget to subscribe to EN True Tales, where every story leaves a mark. I wasn't the golden child. I was the spare one, the useful one. The one who didn't make noise, didn't ask for much, didn't ruin dinner with drama. Astrid got to shine. She was the one my parents talked about at every holiday dinner, the one whose photos covered the fridge, the one who got new outfits for every occasion. I got socks and quiet pats on the back, like I was a project they had mostly finished, but never admired. Growing up in the Frey household meant learning how to become invisible without even trying. My mom, Helena, ran the house like a perfectly set dining table, everything in its place, spotless, symmetrical. Her version of parenting was more about image than substance. If you looked like a good family from the outside, that was enough. Magnus, my father, was the quiet kind of strict. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His rules lived in the air, heavy and cold like the winters here in Doverhill. And if you questioned them, you were ungrateful or making things harder than they had to be. Astrid. She was the exception, the glowing centerpiece. A walking Pinterest board of curated outfits, designer perfume, soft lighting, and practice charm. She knew how to get what she wanted. She didn't even have to try hard. She just had to hint. And somehow, every time it became a family priority, I used to think maybe I was the problem. Maybe I just didn't know how to ask. Maybe my interests weren't interesting enough. I liked building things, drawing, writing code, getting lost in worlds that weren't controlled by other people's moods. That's how the PC started. Not as a rebellion, not even as a dream. Just something I could shape piece by piece, where every part was mine. The first part I ever bought was a used graphics card from a tech swap online. I was 16. I paid for it with money from cleaning snow off driveways all winter. My hands were cracked and red for weeks, but when that package arrived in the mail, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: pride. I kept going. Summer job at a diner saved every tip. Freelance gigs doing small logos and Twitch overlays. Holiday money. $100 here, 50 there. Every part of that machine was earned. The CPU, the motherboard, the tempered glass case, even the RGB fans that I knew my dad hated. He once looked at it and muttered, "Does it really need to glow like a disco?" I didn't answer. That setup wasn't just a computer. It was everything I'd built for myself, without help, without validation. It sat in the corner of my room like a silent rebellion. And the thing is, it worked. That PC got me real gigs, real money. I did mock-ups for local businesses, worked with a few indie devs on graphics packs, even got paid for helping streamers set up overlays and animations. I didn't brag, I didn't demand they notice, but I thought deep down they'd at least respect it, until they didn't. Until one afternoon while I was out grabbing coffee with Nico, they decided the blinking lights weren't useful enough. That I wasn't useful enough. Nico had been my only real anchor for years. We met at a local esports event back in high school, bonded over losing miserably in the finals, and just never stopped talking. He got it. He got the obsession, the grind, the peace that came with creating something digital from scratch. When I texted him what happened, just 5 words. "They sold my PC, bro," he called instantly. "You're joking. I wish. You want me to come over?" "Not yet," I replied. "I'm still processing." Processing wasn't even the word. That machine had been my proof that I could build, that I had worth outside the Frey household narrative. And now it was gone, traded for a dress that Astrid would wear once and post about 100 times. I sat in my room that night staring at the empty desk like it might still hum to life. I tried opening my laptop. The thing wheezed and glitched when I loaded my design software. It was like trying to sculpt marble with a butter knife. Eventually, I shut it down and lay on my bed staring at the ceiling. Cold air leaked from the corners of the window frame. I heard the muffled click of Astrid's heels upstairs. She was probably trying on her new shoes. I didn't sleep. All I could think about was how easy it had been for them. How casual, how certain. They hadn't just sold a machine. They'd confirmed what I'd always suspected. In this house, I was the spare one. The one who wouldn't fight back. The one they could sell. Astrid's door was open when I passed by. I didn't mean to stop, but I did. She was in front of the mirror, twirling slowly in a pale blue silk gown, her phone in one hand, filming herself at different angles, smiling, checking the hem, turning again. "That's the one," she whispered to herself. Voice light, almost dreamy. "Definitely this one." I stood there just inside the frame of the door, watching her wear the thing I'd apparently paid for. "Do you even know what Mom and Dad did so you could have that dress?" She paused. Not because she was shocked. Just surprised I spoke. She didn't turn. "What are you talking about?" "They sold my computer," I said. "My custom build. The one I worked 3 years for. It's gone." She blinked in the mirror like I'd just reminded her of something mildly inconvenient. "Oh, that I took a step in. It wasn't just a computer. It was my work, my livelihood." Astrid gave me that look, the one she's perfected since she was 12. Like I was being dramatic for sport. "You can always build another one, Lukas. You've done it before. You don't get it." "No, I do," she said. "You're doing the whole injustice monologue thing again. You always make everything about suffering." I clenched my fists. That setup was my job, Astrid. It wasn't just blinking lights. I use that rig to earn money. I have deadlines, clients. She turned toward me finally, arms crossed. "You're not the only one in this family with needs. I had nothing to wear to the winter formal. You think that doesn't matter. You think it compares." She scoffed. "You spend all day in your room, gaming, editing stupid logos for other people's Twitch channels. I figured you wouldn't even miss it." I stared at her. My mouth was dry. "You mentioned it, didn't you?" I asked. "You brought it up when they were trying to figure out how to fund your latest wardrobe." She tilted her head. I might have said something, like, that you weren't really using it. "That's a lie, and you know it." She rolled her eyes. "It was just sitting there." "No," I said, voice shaking. "It was working. I was working. Just because you didn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't real." "Okay, calm down," she said, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You're so obsessed with that thing. You act like it's your baby. It was mine. In every sense. Every part bought with my own money. Every hour I put into learning how to build it. You think that's nothing? You're blowing this out of proportion." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. the casualness of her tone, like I was just annoying background noise. You let them take it. And you don't even feel bad. She leaned against the wall and smirked. I didn't sell it. They did. But you knew what would happen. She shrugged. Maybe, but hey, if you really were as independent as you say, you wouldn't need it back, would you? That was it. The moment it clicked. She didn't just not understand. She refused to. You've never earned anything in your life, have you? I said quietly. Everything's handed to you. You float through this house like the world owes you, and they all let you believe it. Astrid's expression didn't change. If anything, she looked entertained. I know how to get what I want, she said. That's called being smart. No, I said, stepping away. That's called stepping on people who can't afford to fight back. I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard the soft click of her camera shutter. Another selfie, another perfect angle. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. I opened my laptop, old slow, the fan wheezing like it had asthma. It took 5 minutes just to open my design software. Then it crashed. Twice. The glow from my screen wasn't warm like it used to be. It felt like failure, like loss, like something had been stolen from me and everyone was telling me to just move on. I sat in the dark, the screen flickering, and all I could think about was the smirk on Astrid's face, the way she said you can always build another one, the way nobody in this house, not a single person, had thought to ask me first. That was when the anger settled in. Quiet, focused. Not the kind that burned you up, the kind that made you move. Because this wasn't just about a computer anymore. This was about everything I'd been taught to swallow. And suddenly, I didn't feel like swallowing anything anymore. The next few days were a quiet kind of war. I tried to stay in my room, to keep to myself, to pretend I could just power through it. But every time Astrid's heels tapped down the hallway, sharp, deliberate, I flinched. Like she was walking on the ashes of everything I'd built. I sat at my desk, where my PC used to be, now replaced with a pitiful plastic lamp and my dying laptop. The fan wheezed. The screen lagged. I opened my design files and waited 5 minutes for one image to load. By the time it finally appeared, the cursor froze. Then the entire program crashed. Again. I stared at the screen, not blinking, not breathing. This was hell. And worse, my freelance deadlines were crawling closer. I had 3 clients waiting. One had already sent a second email, just checking in. Still on track for Friday, I couldn't even open the mock-up without my machine choking. I felt like someone had cut off my hands and told me to type faster. My room smelled like dust and stale frustration. Outside, the snow kept falling over Dover Hill, thick, slow, blanketing everything in silence. But inside me, something was screaming. I grabbed my phone and called Nico. He picked up after the second ring. You okay? No. I told him about the crashes, about the lag, about how Astrid had bought a matching bag for her heels, and how my mom said she looked like a princess. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. You need to do something, he said. Like what? I can't exactly break into the buyer's house and take it back. I'm not saying go full Grand Theft Auto, he said, but you could start with receipts. Receipts. Yeah, proof it was yours. The parts, the money, the build. I blinked. I still have the invoices, I said slowly, and the photos. I documented every stage of the build. I even have screenshots of the income from clients who paid me. Then build a case, Nico said. You can't just sit there and let them think this was okay. I leaned back in my chair. The ceiling fan spun above me in slow, lazy circles. Proof, logic, facts, not yelling, not pleading, just showing them black and white that what they did was wrong. And suddenly, for the first time since the PC disappeared, I didn't feel helpless. I opened a folder on my cloud drive titled The Rig. Inside, a photo of me holding the first graphics card, receipts from my PayPal history, screenshots of Fiverr gigs, time-stamped pictures of the build from bare motherboard to final glow. Every piece told the story of how that machine came to be. And every piece pointed to one truth. That machine was mine. I started compiling it all into a folder, labeled everything, dated it, annotated which payments were connected to which client. I even included a copy of the email thread with a streamer I helped set up last month. The further I went, the calmer I felt, like stacking bricks around a wound, building a wall between me and the way they made me feel. Around midnight, I paused, looked around my room. The silence was different now. Focused. Ready. I didn't know what I'd do with this file yet, but I knew one thing. If they wanted to pretend it wasn't theft, I was going to remind them what truth looked like. The next morning, I printed out everything, each page crisp clear, no emotion, just evidence. I slid them into a folder and set it beside my backpack. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't look like revenge, it looked like accountability, and honestly, that felt better. Later that night, I heard Magnus laughing downstairs. The sound drifted up with the smell of Astrid's new perfume. Vanilla and arrogance. I sat on my bed, hands clasped. This wasn't about rage anymore. This was about drawing a line, and I was finally ready to cross it. Dinner that night was roasted chicken, steamed potatoes, and quiet tension. I waited until everyone was seated until Astrid started scrolling through her phone, and Magnus was halfway through pouring himself a glass of water. Then I placed the folder on the table. Thud. A soft sound, but it landed like thunder in my chest. Helena looked at it confused. "What's this? I want my money back," I said. My voice was steady. No shouting, just steel. Magnus set down his fork. "Money, the $1, $200 you got from selling my PC," I said. "I built that computer with my own money. Legally, it belongs to me. You had no right to sell it," Helena scoffed. "Lukas, we've already been over this." "No," I interrupted. "You told me what you decided. That's not the same as being over it," Magnus frowned. "Watch your tone, boy. We are your parents. Everything in this house belongs to you." "Yeah, I've heard that line before." I opened the folder and pulled out the first sheet. This is the invoice for the graphics card. Bought with my own money, saved from my job at the diner. Next sheet. This is the receipt for the CPU birthday money from 2 years ago. Another. Here's the payment history from my design gigs. Proof I used the PC to earn money. I looked up. Helena's face had gone pale. Magnus's jaw clenched. "And this," I said, placing the final page, "is the buyer's copy of the transaction. You sold it for $1, $200. That money is mine." Helena pushed her chair back. "How dare you accuse us of stealing? I'm not accusing. I'm stating a fact," I said calmly. "You sold something that wasn't yours. You didn't ask. You didn't even leave a note. That's not parenting. That's theft." "You're blowing this out of proportion," she snapped. Astrid finally looked up from her phone. "Oh my God, are you seriously threatening Mom and Dad over a computer? That's pathetic." I turned to her slowly. "What's pathetic is that you think someone else's hard work is disposable. You benefited from something you didn't earn, and you don't even care." Astrid rolled her eyes. "It's not my fault they decided to sell it. But you mentioned it," I said. "You planted the idea, and you knew exactly what they'd do." "I only said you weren't using it much," she said, her voice lilting with false innocence. "I figured you'd appreciate a break." "A break?" I laughed, once sharp, bitter. "You think stripping away the one thing I built for myself is helpful?" Astrid leaned forward. "You're always preaching about being independent. I figured you wouldn't mind helping out the family for once." I felt my fist clench under the table. My heart was racing, but my voice stayed low. "You didn't need a new wardrobe, Astrid. You wanted one. There's a difference." "Maybe you're just mad," she said, "because I know how to get what I want, and you're too busy sulking to figure it out." That hit harder than I expected. Not because she was right, but because she truly believed it. Magnus slammed his palm on the table. "Enough." The plates rattled. Everyone froze. He looked at me, his eyes cold. "We'll pay you back, but don't expect anything else from us. You're on your own from now on." I looked down at my hands, then up at him, calm, unflinching. "I've been on my own for years, Dad. The difference now is I'm done letting you take advantage of me." He didn't reply. Nobody did. Helena looked like she'd swallowed her tongue. Astrid crossed her arms and leaned back, lips tight. No yelling, no storming out, no slammed doors. Just silence. And in that silence, I felt something unhook from my chest. Like a cord had been cut. Like I was no longer waiting for approval I'd never get. The next morning, I woke up to a plain white envelope on my desk. Inside, $1,200 in cash. No note, no apology, just money. I counted it slowly, methodically. Then I packed the folder, grabbed my bag, and walked out into the frozen air. The wind bit my face as I stood at the end of the driveway, phone in hand. I dialed the number. The man who bought the PC answered on the second ring. I explained everything, told him I had the cash, asked if he was still willing to sell it back. He paused for a moment, then said yes. I could hear Astrid laughing somewhere inside the house behind me. But it didn't matter anymore. I was getting my machine back. Not just the hardware, not just the work, but the one part of myself they couldn't keep this time. The man who bought the PC met me in the parking lot of a hardware store just outside town. He was polite, didn't say much, just opened the trunk and nodded toward the black case wrapped in a thick blanket. It was mine. I knew it the second I saw the custom vinyl sticker still stuck to the side panel, the one I'd made during a late night in Photoshop. He helped me load it gently into the back seat of my car. No small talk. Just a quiet handshake, an understanding kind of nod, and he was gone. I sat in the car for a while after he left, just staring at the case. Like it was a person I hadn't seen in months. Like it had come home from war. My hands trembled when I touched it. Not from anger this time, but from something like relief. Like reclaiming part of myself. I didn't bring it home, not yet. I drove straight to Nico's place. He opened the door, still half-dressed in joggers, a spoonful of cereal in one hand. When he saw the PC, his eyes lit up. "Dude, you actually got it." I nodded. "It's back." He helped me bring it inside, and we set it on his coffee table like it was sacred. We didn't talk much that night. Just sat on the floor with takeout while I quietly reinstalled the cables and booted it up. When that startup chime hit, I felt something settle in my chest. That's when I knew. I couldn't stay at the house anymore. Not after this. Not after seeing what freedom felt like, even just for one evening. The next morning, I started searching for apartments. I didn't have much saved, but I had enough to make something work barely. Most listings were way out of budget, but eventually I found a small studio about 15 minutes from town. One room, a kitchenette, a bathroom no bigger than a closet. But it had a window and a lock. That was enough. I called the landlord, took a tour the next day, signed the lease on the spot. No part of me hesitated. That afternoon I sat in my car outside the Frey house engine, running, staring up at the second-story window that used to be mine. The snow had started to melt, leaving streaks on the glass. Inside, they were probably sitting down for dinner again. Astrid complaining about calories. Helena telling her she was perfect. Magnus reading the paper like nothing ever happened. I didn't go in. Instead, I texted Nico. "Me, can I store a few boxes at your place this week?" Nico, say when. Over the next few days, I started moving out one piece at a time. A box of books, a laundry basket full of hoodies, my hard drives, my drawing tablet, the small stuff first. I kept my door locked, stayed quiet, smiled just enough to avoid suspicion. Astrid didn't notice, too busy modeling her latest heels for Instagram. Helena was a little more alert. She started asking questions. "You've been quiet lately," she said one evening while slicing carrots. "Just busy," I mumbled, keeping my eyes on my phone. Magnus didn't say anything, just gave me that look over the top of his glasses, the one that meant he knew something but wouldn't ask yet. I worked harder than I ever had in my life that week. Nico helped me update my freelance portfolio. I reconnected with old clients, cold emailed new ones, and posted my availability on design forums. Within days, I had 3 jobs lined up, enough to cover my first month's rent. And then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my streaming app. The interface welcomed me back like an old friend. I hit go live. No plan, no script. Just me, a screen, and a game. Only 5 viewers showed up that night. One of them was Nico. Another said, "Didn't expect you back, bro." I smiled. I didn't need hundreds. I just needed to feel like myself again. That week passed like a blur. Packing in silence was harder than any screaming match. Because every box was a secret. Every step out the door was a step away from who I used to be. The night before the final move, Helena knocked on my door. She didn't wait for me to say come in, just entered like always. I was taping up the last box. "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone unnaturally soft. I didn't look at her, just kept folding tape. "I don't really have much to say." She sat on the edge of my bed, pretending things were normal. "You have to understand," she began. "We didn't sell your computer to hurt you. We just didn't know what else to do." I looked at her then. "You had options. You just didn't choose any of them that involved respecting me." She flinched. "Tiffany said you hadn't used it in a while." "Her name is Astrid." She paused. "Right, she didn't even get that right." I turned back to the box and said, "I have to go." She stood slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. We thought you'd understand. You've always been so independent. I didn't answer. After she left, I sat on the floor next to my PC. Ran my hand across the side panel. The vinyl sticker was still there, and beneath it, so was I. The next morning, I loaded up the last of my boxes and left a folded note on the kitchen counter. Just a few lines. I need space. I need time. Please don't call. I didn't look back when I closed the door. The air outside was cold, sharp, but for the first time in years, I could finally breathe. I thought that once I moved out, things would finally go quiet. But by the afternoon of the very next day, my phone lit up like a fire alarm. Missed calls first from Mom, then Dad, then both again and again. I didn't answer. I let it ring. I knew what they'd say. I could already hear the tone, that carefully practiced disappointment wrapped in concern. And I wasn't interested. A few hours later, the voicemail came. You could have at least told us you were leaving, my mom's voice said. Your father and I are very disappointed in how you handled this. Family is about sticking together, not running away. I didn't finish listening. I deleted it. Then came the texts. From her, from him, over and over again. You've hurt your mother. We've always done what we thought was best for you. You're being reckless. You're turning your back on your family. And for the first time in my life, none of it made me feel guilty. That evening, I was setting up my first solo stream in months when another message came through. Astrid, you left lol. Guess you couldn't handle it. Anyway, Mom's freaking out. You might want to call her before she has a meltdown. I stared at that message longer than I should have. Then I turned off notifications altogether. The stream that night wasn't huge, 12 viewers, but it was mine. I talked, I laughed. I built something in real time. And not once did I think about the house I used to live in. Over the next 2 weeks, the messages didn't stop. Some days, it was quiet. Others, they came in waves, accusations, guilt rewrites of history that tried to make them the victims. Mom texted about how hard it was for her, about how Astrid was upset too, and how my actions had torn the family apart. That part made me laugh. Astrid hadn't spoken to me once since I left. Not unless you counted the snide text and that last smirk the night I confronted them. She didn't care I was gone. She probably just missed the convenience. One night, Nico came over with a greasy box of pizza, and that grin of his that always said he had opinions locked and loaded. So he said between bites, "They still treating you like the villain in their telenovela?" I nodded. Apparently, I've broken their hearts, betrayed their trust, and become a lost soul corrupted by freedom and self-respect. He laughed. You think they'll ever stop? Probably not. You gonna answer any of it? No, not even to get the last word. I don't need it anymore. There was a silence between us then, not awkward, just heavy. Because he got it. He knew this wasn't just about money, or a computer, or a room. It was about finally choosing not to play the role they wrote for me. A few days later, I bumped into Mrs. Halverson at the local coffee shop. She's one of those family friend types who always knows more than she lets on. She leaned in gently and said, "I heard you moved out. Your parents, they're having a hard time." I sipped my coffee, said nothing. "They've been asking around," she continued, "looking for help, loans. I think they overextended a bit, buying things for Astrid." And just like that, I felt it. Not vindication, not joy, just a confirmation. They never planned around me. They never counted me in. They just assumed I'd always be there to cover the gaps, even when they were the ones who dug the holes. That night I worked late, 2 freelance projects, and a new stream overlay to design. I felt good, focused, tired, but on my own terms. Around midnight, Nico texted me. Guess who I ran into? I replied, "Who, your mom?" At the store, frozen pizza aisle. I didn't respond. Then he added, "She cornered me. Said you've been influenced by bad company." I think I'm the bad company, by the way. I laughed. He went on. "I told her you're doing great. Said maybe if they respected you more, you wouldn't have had to leave." I didn't say it out loud, but that might have been the kindest thing anyone had done for me all month. It didn't make me miss them. It just reminded me why I left. A few nights later, a different kind of message arrived. This one from Mom. Short, almost polite. "Your sister's birthday is coming up. We'd like you to come home for dinner. It would mean a lot to her." I stared at the message for a long time. I imagined it for a second. The table, the polite smiles, the "how have you been"-ness that meant nothing, the unsaid expectation that I'd play along. But I knew what it was. It wasn't an invitation. It was a test. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being the bad guy. I was just done pretending. A day after the birthday invitation, I did something I hadn't done since I left. I called my mom, not because I wanted to, but because I was tired of the open loops, the vague threads, the passive-aggressive silence. When she picked up, her voice was sugar-dipped. "Oh, honey," she said, "it's so good to hear from you. I didn't waste time. I got your text," I said. "About Astrid's birthday dinner." "Yes," she replied quickly. "We're having something small, just the family. Astrid would love to see you." I let the pause hang. "I don't think I can make it," I said. She hesitated. "You're really going to let your sister down like this," she said. And just like that, the guilt was back on stage. "After everything we've done for you." My throat was tight, but I didn't flinch. "Mom, this isn't about Astrid," I said. "This is about how every time I try to be a part of this family, it feels like I'm the only one trying. You took something from me without asking. You've never once apologized. And now you want me to pretend everything's fine." Another long pause, then cold and clipped. "Fine. If you want to throw your family away, that's your choice. But don't come crying to us when you realize what you've lost." I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I said the words I'd been carrying for years. "Mom, I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval, and it was never enough. So no, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm just finally putting myself first." She didn't say a word. I hung up before she could. My hands were shaking. It didn't feel victorious. It felt quiet, like laying something to rest. I blocked both of their numbers after that. Not out of hate, but out of necessity. I needed peace, and they weren't capable of offering it. Astrid never reached out, and honestly, that made things easier. Without the noise, I threw myself fully into work. I redesigned my entire freelance website, turned on alerts for commissions, joined 3 Discord servers, and launched a consistent streaming schedule. And things started moving, slowly, steadily. One day during a stream, someone in the chat asked, "What made you start doing this?" I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it real. I started streaming, I said, because I love it. But also, because I needed to prove to myself that I could build something that couldn't be taken away. The chat lit up. "Damn, man. That hits. You're an inspiration. Built different. Respect." And for the first time, I felt something shift. Not because strangers were cheering me on, but because I didn't need them to. I was no longer waiting for anyone's permission to exist. A few weeks later, I was out grabbing groceries when I ran into Mrs. Halverson again. She looked surprised to see me, but not unkind. "I heard your parents have been struggling," she said gently. "Asking around for help. I suppose they didn't expect things to turn out like this." I nodded politely. "I hope they're okay," and I meant it. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want anyone to suffer. I just wanted space, respect, a life I didn't have to justify every minute. That night, I scrolled through Instagram. Astrid had posted a picture from her birthday dinner. She wore a red velvet dress. The caption read, "So grateful for a family that always puts me first." And yeah, I believed her. They did. And now they'd have to keep doing it without me. I didn't like cutting people off. But sometimes distance isn't punishment, it's preservation. These days, my apartment still smells like cardboard and ramen. The furniture is mismatched, the walls are bare, but when I close the door behind me at night, it feels like mine. And when I sit in front of my PC, open my programs, go live, or sketch something for a client, there's no shadow behind me. No voice saying be careful, or don't forget your sister, or we know what's best. It's just me. And it's enough. Freedom doesn't always feel triumphant. It's quiet and a little sad, but it's yours. One night, deep into a late stream, someone in the chat dropped a question. "Hey man, what actually happened? Why'd you move out?" I stared at the screen for a few seconds. Usually I'd dodge that kind of question, crack a joke, deflect. But that night something felt different. I took a breath, and I answered. "My parents sold my PC," I said, without asking. Said my sister needed a new wardrobe for some school event. The chat went still. Then wait, for real? No way. That's wild. I kept going. "That PC wasn't just gear," I said. "It was 3 years of work. Every part I saved for, every cable I installed. It wasn't just how I played games, it was how I worked, how I created. It was mine." More messages trickled in. I'd lose my mind. Bro, I'm actually pissed for you. I nodded almost to myself. But here's the thing, I continued. That day when I walked into my room and saw it gone, I realized something even worse than losing the PC. They didn't think it mattered. They didn't even feel bad. And that was the real break. They didn't just sell a PC, I said. They sold their place in my life. The chat paused, then exploded. That line hit hard. Chills? You're right. Respect is the line. I sat back reading the flood of reactions, not smiling, just steady. Look, I said, I don't hate them. I'm not even angry anymore. I'm just done fighting to be visible in a place that was never going to see me. And that was the truth. Because at some point, silence stops being strength and becomes survival. At some point, walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means choosing peace, choosing yourself. And yeah, sometimes that means you lose people. But what you gain is everything. That stream ended quietly, but my heart felt full. Later that night, I stared at the soft glow of my PC. The hum of the fans, the screensaver, looping gently. It was the same rig, but the person behind it wasn't the same anymore. I had built something no one could take from me again. Not just a machine, but a life. And if you're listening to this, maybe you're standing at that same line I was once forced to draw. Maybe you've been told your needs are too much, that your silence is expected, that your sacrifices are automatic. Here's what I learned. You don't need permission to outgrow pain. You don't need to wait for an apology that will never come. You don't need a perfect family to deserve a peaceful future. You just need one decision. Choose you, always. What did you think of this story? If you were in Lucas's shoes, how would you have handled it? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you support Lucas choosing peace, vote number 2. If you think he should have stayed and kept the family together, vote number 7. Don't forget to subscribe to EN True Tales for more stories like this, where real voices find real power, one truth at a time.